and thank you so much for joining us. I have Karen with me today, and we're going to be talking about the idea of keeping people in the loop at every stage of an AI implementation. But before we dive into the questions that I have for you, Karen, would you mind giving everybody an introduction?
Hi, thank you, Emma, for having me. I'm Karen Silverman and the CEO and founder of a new boutique consulting group that really is its whole purpose for being is to think about these issues and help companies and other organizations, private and public sector, really work through this. It's a brave new world.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me. And I guess what I'd like to do to get started is maybe have you share a little bit about the idea of what it means to have a human in the loop, and then maybe dive into the idea of how having humans in the loop at each stage can help impact the quality of an AI solution.
Sure. And I should say that I sometimes take issue with the phrase "human in a loop" because it suggests that there's sort of one place that we should put one human, and that's going to be adequate to the task. And so I challenge that a little bit and think more about humans as being the loop, right? That there's no part of the loop that doesn't um, involve us and involve the people that we work with and the people that we think about and the people that we impact. So really and then the loop itself, when we break it down, is really the AI life cycle in the case of AI, which has some pretty distinct phases. And what we do is we think about how not only data and technology impact each of those phases or are implicated at those phases, but then how the people interacting and intersecting in each of those phases can be so important and really determinative of whether, first of all, a product works and works well, but secondly, whether it works responsibly. And so it's bringing all that stuff together, which is what we do. And I use my background as a lawyer to inform that. I use my background in markets and strategy as a background, and we pull together advisors from sort of all around industry and academia with a real wide range of experience to think about these issues, because it's when you start to break down how people and data and technology intersect in all these different ways, you really need all those perspectives. And so the loop is both a time thing, and it's a discipline and multi-stakeholder thing, and we're everywhere in it.
Great, thank you. We'll have to have another conversation a different day about non-traditional paths getting into the world of technology. I came from the world of teaching, and so it's always fascinating to me to learn a little bit more about what that path looked like for people. So as we take a look at humans involved at every stage, and I like how you kind of outlined that it's not one person at one spot within this life cycle. How does bringing people in at every stage of the process help support better adoption of a solution over time?
This has a lot of dimensions to it, right? Because I think many of us know intuitively, and increasingly there's research to substantiate this, that organizations work better just in general when there's a diversity of perspective that comes to bear, right? That if people are looking at a problem or a problem set with only one perspective, you're more likely to reinforce each other's cognitive biases and miss vulnerabilities and opportunities, both, that somebody with a slightly different perspective might detect and vocalize. So there's just that fact, but there's also this important element of AI systems as applied that really relies on humans to provide the forethought, right? So it's the selection of the use case, the defining of the problem, it's the assessment of what sort of tools are the best tools to solve the problem. It's very much around the language, about how we're going to express the problem to each other, but then also to the tool, right? So that we're testing and looking for the right things. and there's about a million other things in the middle, but then if just skipping to the end for a minute, it's also how we're going to receive, interpret, and communicate the outputs from the tool, right? And that stage often gets overlooked, right? It's the human in the loop is around to see whether the tool made a good job or made a good assessment or didn't make a good assessment, is sort of how that's traditionally thought of. But that's not, or whether that's a prediction that's reasonable or legal or something. But and that's really important to do. But as important, I think, and what we're finding in the field is that that these AI tools produce all kinds of insights and outputs and predictions that need to be contextualized, and they need to be contextualized for perhaps an audience that isn't as technology savvy or isn't prepared to learn certain things about themselves or others, or they think they want to know something, or they think they want to watch this kind of a movie, but it turns out they really want to watch that kind of a movie, or something much more impactful around, for instance, a medical diagnosis or any other number of things. So it's being very mindful of how humans are still largely the audience for a lot of these outputs and insights, that when we deliver them, they need to be delivered carefully and sort of respectfully, for lack of a better word, and that the human discourse and human thinking and human empathy are very much parts of how we approach that work, and that has to be part of the work by design. So we sort of impacted at the beginning, impacting quality and robustness, and then we impact it also at the end, around how safe, effective, and responsible those tools end up being, at the end. In the middle, there's all sorts of things we can and should be doing too, but I tend to really focus at those stages because those are the ones that often are, as I say, overlooked.
So you talked a little bit about this diversity in thought and how that can influence the tools that we're creating. And I want to dive into that idea a little bit more and maybe focus in specifically on how having that diversity in thought and having humans in that loop can help us in terms of counteracting bias that we may or are starting to see more and more within our AI applications as we open up our eyes to kind of this idea. Can you expand on that a little bit further?
Thanks, Emma. So it's a really interesting question, and I think it's one that we're all working through from a variety of perspectives, and it's very much at the heart of diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations, but it's also at the heart of organizational design more generally, right? So we're talking about making sure that teams reflect different, the diversity of professional experience, of lived experience, of age and geography and cultural diversity, and how that ends up helping, like I said, is it's, we're just, as I say, two heads are better than one. There's more opportunity to see opportunities, and there's more opportunity to see vulnerabilities when you've got people looking from different perspectives with different sort of baseline expectations. And I think that all plays into these AI projects. And I referred earlier a little bit to the language and how much it's about how we communicate what we want the tools to do, what we want, what we think the real problem is, like what problem are we solving, how are we solving it, and how are we going to explain it to other people. And I think the diversity of inputs and the multi-stakeholder part of that also goes to the language, right? Because sometimes we say things and we think we're being clear, like me today, and someone might have a question about some word that got used or some phrase or some association, and the opportunity to continue to clarify and perfect our message is something really important when it comes to AI, because how we define the problems, how we align those problems with the tools we intend to use, how we then intend to communicate the results of those and outputs of those tools, all requires some kind of understanding around language. And right now, our language around these tools is pretty terrible. Like and it's not even terrible in the sense that we use bad words. It's terrible in the sense that it's very imprecise, and we tend to use words where everybody brings their own meaning and definition to them. And so it's valuable to pause and understand what somebody means by fairness, And what a developer means by fairness may be a very different thing than what an HR manager means by fairness. And so unless you're really taking the time to stitch that together, you're bound to get miscommunications that are going to frustrate everybody. This is maybe the most important thing that we all need to keep in mind, is that this is a really important time to ask questions, right, of ourselves and each other. And we should absolutely not be offended when people don't know what we mean or question our thinking, because it's there are many, many more questions than there are answers, and people need a permitted and safe way to start to develop confidence and competency in this area, and to bring the benefit of their diverse perspectives. And so I would just encourage everybody to think about this as a time of inquiry, right? And that, as I say, there are no dumb questions. There probably, eventually we'll get to a point where we have enough of a common baseline that we can make, assumptions about things, but this is not that time yet. And so it's very interesting, but I would encourage everybody to participate. So long answer short, that's one of the reasons that this multi-stakeholder perspective and this inclusive approach matters quite so much, right? And having accountable leaders who invite that communication and invite that maybe even messiness at the outset, but it leads to this robustness at the end that that can be very, very powerful.
I love that you talked a little bit about to me, that's the messiness is the human part of the technology side of it, and welcoming that part of the conversation, I think, is such an important part of the evolution of this industry. And we're at such a unique stage in history where we get to influence how all of this really takes shape in our world. And it's, it'll be interesting to watch the ride and learn the lessons along with the technology and the rest of the folks in the industry. So thank you for sitting down and sharing your thoughts on kind of these ideas and the idea of humans being in the loop. I want to encourage everybody who isn't already to go follow Karen on LinkedIn. And then also, if you want to learn a little bit more about her thoughts on this idea, she has a wonderful article on the AI Journal that I'll link as well, for you to take a peek at and dive into maybe some of the bits in the middle there that you referred to. But thank you so much for joining me, Karen, and have a wonderful day, everyone. If you're looking for expert tips on how to get started with your transformation or looking to hone in on your approach, make sure that you subscribe to our channel to catch our weekly Digital Transformation Talk series, where we interview experts from around the world on how to make it happen.